Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We are going to have a great show. In the first hour, we're going to be talking to Hugh Newman about the mystery of giants of North America. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking to Craig Campobasso about a stranger at the Pentagon. I wonder if he stayed for dinner. Anyway, don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, clairvoyant readings, and energy healing. If you've missed an episode of Just Energy Radio, you can always go to our website, www.justenergyradio.com, and listen to the archive. While you're there, you can sign up for the Just Energy Radio newsletter. You can also check out the show on our YouTube channel, Just Energy Radio. While you're there, please do subscribe to the channel and show your support. Or you can come here to the Inception Radio Network and listen to the show on the Inception Radio page, or download the extra cool Inception Radio app for your smartphone. Let's see. So, I've been really busy, and so I don't have like a million announcements because I've been too busy doing other things. That's kind of weird. So let me tell you a little bit about Hugh and get him on the air because I think this is going to be a fun and lively conversation. Hugh Newman is an Earth mysteries and esoteric science researcher. He organizes the Megalithomania conferences, co-edits Avalon Rising magazine, and coordinates talks, films, and workshops at numerous festivals. He has researched and published a book on the subject. His most recent book, Earth Grids, The Secret Patterns of Gaia's Sacred Sites. Okay. He is an honorary member of the Antiquarian, Hugh, your biography has too many hard words, Antiquarian Society, and has spoken at conferences in the UK, Malta, France, Peru, and North America. He is currently writing a book about the Wandlebury complex near Cambridge. So from megalithomania.co.uk, Hugh Newman. Hey, Hugh, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I am so glad to have you on. I always enjoy our conversations. You're just so easy to talk to and just so filled with information. It just amazes me.
Good stuff. Okay, let's see what we've got today then.
Well, okay, so today, I'm hoping we're going to talk about giants, particularly those in America. But to start off, to kind of get this ball rolling, who or what do you think the reports of giant bones? Okay. I write all these notes, at least that first one, to get things going, and then I'm like, I can't even read it. I think I need glasses, Hugh. That's really a bad thing.
Okay.
I mean, who do you think the giants are? Do you think they're humans? Or do you think they're, like giant humans, like that you find in the circus? Or do you think there might be something else going on?
Well, that's a very broad question, but it's like, I must let people know that I think everyone's heard about giants, all their life. They hear these legends, these stories, these sort of, these photographs they see of these sort of mummified remains and things like this. But it wasn't until I really read Ross Hamilton's book, A Tradition of Giants, which is an excellent introduction and outline of what is going on in Ohio, especially that kind of area, where they found hundreds of these skeletons in all the mounds, and in other places too, in ancient graveyards, of these very powerful, very tall people. And he reconstructed the story about how when they fought in the wars thousands of years ago, and who they where they may have come from. I mean, many of them have double rows of teeth and things like this. It's very strange. Some of them are very tall, and yet this has kind of been written out of history. And so thanks to people like Ross and also David Hatch Childress and others have been putting the word out and like keeping and pulling out these stories that have been reported in all these major newspapers going back a couple of hundred years. And so there's so much, so many were reported that now my friend and researcher Jim Vieira and Ross and myself will be gathering data. And there are thousands of reports, so like a couple of thousand reports of these just in North America, in all the different counties. One interesting example that I was fascinated by was Lompoc in California, which is around Los Angeles. And there's a place called Lompoc Ranch. And earlier last century, a 12-foot skeleton was dug up when they were digging there. And I think it was on display for a while. Then it kind of disappeared, and Smithsonian got involved. And the funny thing about that was I went there a few years ago to kind of check out what was going on, and if there's any evidence or research on that. And now it's a complete military zone, the whole Lompoc Ranch area. So that gives you some inkling of what we're dealing with. It seems to be. There were extremely tall people going back thousands of years in North America, some with double rows of teeth, and a very powerful race. And when you want to know who they were.
Well, I mean, you start talking about double rows of teeth that, they might be humanoid, but it brings up the distinct question, were they human, in the way we think of humanity?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I'm pretty sure they were human. There's one weird skull they found, I think it was in Wisconsin, where it's got like horns, which kind of was quite freaky. And you can actually, check that out on the internet and stuff. And so that's kind of odd, but that's only one example. It could have been like a freak of nature. It could have been glued on or something, who knows. But these double rows of teeth, the long heads as well, as you know, the long skulls. There's been one of those discovered around, I think Michigan or Wisconsin, and there's different tribes used to the head binding as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And even down in Mexico, just over the border, down in Sonora, there's a whole area there where long skulls were found, and also they found giant skeletons. So I think that may have been the place where the long heads and the giants, kind of these different races that have now died out, obviously, were kind of hanging out and spreading out from. So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. I think that's the thing, and this is what me, Jim, and Ross have been researching.
Well, and the part I find interesting is that, in current newspapers and scientific journals, they don't mention them at all. But when or newspapers, but when you go back, and I'm going to say pre-1930, that's where you start seeing that kind of information. Any thoughts as to why it all kind of dried up?
Well, there's a few possibilities with that. Ross wrote a book about how the giants kind of died out, really, and it was kind of covered up, mainly regarding the Smithsonian Institution. There's some other books. There's another book coming out later this year for Inner Traditions, and there's one that we're working on as well, to kind of get this information out there. But it seems that when you start looking at all the old newspaper reports, this is where it gets really interesting, because you have people like doctors and judges and clever people, intelligent people finding these bones, and they're measuring them, and they're recording the lengths of them, and like publishing it in the local newspaper. New York Times had hundreds of reports over the years, which is something that Ross originally, and now Jim has found many more of these reports, all from all over the country. Almost the whole country, really. It's not just one area, but it does seem to congregate around Ohio, where a majority come with the Mound culture sites. And so, yeah, there's I just find the sheer amount of them quite amazing as well. But we do have to question it, and it just seems to be this, like you say, this cut-off point back in the early 1900s, where it just seems like the Smithsonian got involved. It wasn't part of their kind of, they'd have to rewrite all the history books and change all the Christian history books and things like this, and they obviously weren't really up for it. And it was just part of the agenda back then, really, is to kind of see all the Native Americans as savages, and so they could dominate them. And now, obviously, we realise that was wrong. And the NAGPRA Repatriation Act. Actually, a lot of the Native Americans bought. The skeletons are now back in their possession to be reburied or reinterred, and so some that were on display have now been taken as well. So there's not much left to kind of see. That's the problem. But for example, Jim was telling me about up in not Ashfield, Massachusetts, around the area in Western Mass. There's a museum there and some other place, and that whole area there was some giants found. There was even, I think, a leg bone on display, which would have shown it was an 8-foot giant. And then there was a scrapbook of this guy who was researching them like 150 years ago or so. Could put all these reports together. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on, and I think it's not just in North America. It's all over the world. There's other places where it's kind of strong. I'm just about to get into my teeth into some research, just my one row of teeth, into some research in England to see what we can find here, because I think there's a lot of the same kind of things being going on. But I think it's just, I think people need to kind of question the official stance on history to find out what was really going on.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I feel is that if you have culture after culture around the world talking about a specific concept, then there has to be some kind of nugget of truth in it. And it seems like regardless of the culture you ask, hopefully getting back to, root information, and these indigenous cultures, that they all make references to giants at some point in time in their history and cosmology.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you obviously get that in the Middle East. You get it in England, obviously. There's lots and lots of legends of giants. But what it's come back to, though, what a lot of people come back to, is the fact that that's often the only way they can explain how the megalithic sites were built. They must have been built by giants because they're so huge. How could anyone our size do that? And they say the demons do it, or the devil does it, or the gods do it. And so it could be because there's these megalithic ancient structures that are inexplicable. No one knows how they could have constructed them, so they must have been giants. So that's one. I think that is a mindset, that people have about it. But then there's the remains that have been found, which go, there actually were some. Okay, well, that opens up a whole other Pandora's box, and then you have to question, well, why was that covered up? And like you get these sort of hoaxes that come out, these sort of sideshow attractions and circus attractions, where they actually make them, construct them from something and have them as a sort of freak of nature kind of mummy or whatever. And so there's that. You sort of, it's a bit like almost like the crop circles. It's like you just don't know what's real and what's not, what's genuine and what's fake. And so there's this kind of thing going on even with the giants, the way people look back at them now. So I can understand why people don't believe it, but I think when you start seriously looking at the number of reports, and when I first read Ross's 3 books on the giants he's written, which are quite brilliant. You can get them on the ancientamerican.com website, the Ancient American magazine website. You can buy them there. I highly recommend them. And then Jim Vieira, I've been in touch with and visited him, and we started working on a new project. He's compiled something like between 1,500 and 2,000 reports. And so just from American newspapers and different publications over the last few hundred years. So you can't deny that. there's too many to kind of ignore and put off as coincidence. So you have to kind of take these kind of factors into consideration and just look at the evidence, really.
Well, with you talking about all the reports in newspapers, what came to mind are all of the UFO reports that have been put into newspapers over the years, and look at how much good that's done them in recent days. Not a whole lot.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. It's a similar thing. And that's the problem. Is we need people to say, well, where are the remains? Let's show me some evidence. So that's the problem, because there's not only is it being covered up, there's also the Repatriation Act, which has taken what was available and on view away. So there's nothing left to see unless someone's got something in some private collection. But even in some museums up to like 15 years ago or so, some were on display, and there were giant skulls in certain places, things like this. So yeah, it'll all come out, I'm sure. But I think just the reports alone are kind of excellent evidence. Regardless of if remains are found or not, because you don't get that many reports over that 200 years of time, if all different counties and states of America. You have to just accept them. You can't deny the reports. They're there. They've been printed in a newspaper. They're published. That part of it actually happened. You know what I mean? And I can't imagine people would lie in all different parts of the country and almost say the same things. Is like a massive countrywide conspiracy in the 1800s? I don't think so. So that's the kind of argument you get against the possibility that these really did exist. And so there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of denial.
Well, I mean, but I've seen some things like, and I don't know. It was just this really cool picture of these like double-headed axes that were huge. I mean, the things had to have been 7 feet tall by themselves. That, were they ancient? Were they modern giant reproductions? I don't know. But then, I take into account like those masks that Klaus Donna shows in his work that, according to him, they won't fit on your face. And, they just get written off as, a decorative item. But, he measured them and said, oh, well, if you were a giant head, based on these reports, it would fit you perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people find these jawbones or these skulls. Skulls are so big, they put them over their head, things like that. Sometimes the skull is, almost an inch thick. It's half an inch, 3/4 of an inch thick. Some of them, so it's very thick. And the bones are very big and strong, kind of looking bones. But yeah, I think the reports and the measurements of from the early days of when they colonized America, there's a lot of reports there. There's even like reports of people like George Washington meeting some giants up in New England area when he first around the time he was president and things like that. They were 7-footers, 7.5 feet, and up to just a few hundred years ago. So it's not, in Patagonia, down in, South America, same thing there. Cook, saw giant, and there were reports of very, very tall people. And that was just who they were. And I think they just eventually died out. But there are some negative aspects, something that Ross points out in his books, and some of the traditions of the Native Americans, where they were kind of cannibals and they would like chase and hunt people. So they were
that part.
That part, yeah. And so they had to defend themselves. So I think that might be why they may have died out, because they were kind of, ambushed by the small humans or us. And so, that's another consideration. Where they died out. But often they were like, people think they were warriors. They were at the front of any battles that were taking place because they were the biggest and strongest. That could have been why they kind of died out. Or it could have been other factors. It could have been, it could be diseases, who knows. But they do go up till relatively recently. And I'm just frustrated by the fact that it's not general knowledge, this. I think that's what annoys me. And so that's why I really respect people like Ross and Jim and others, Steve Quayle, who's done some excellent research, and Fritz Zimmerman's compiled many accounts in the Midwest area. It's just, we're just questing for like what's going on, what happened, and, in our past, our history, our ancestry. And, why shouldn't we research it? And why aren't we? Why isn't it out there now? It's kind of obviously it's being suppressed.
Well, I mean, it just seems like it's just one of the things that's suppressed. I mean, my husband, Wayne LaLiberty, believes, or he has suggested or postulated on the idea that the giants might have been the actually originating race in the United States or in the Americas prior to the Indians actually getting here. And that there was something that happened so that even when the Native Americans got here, that the land was fairly pristine.
That's one interesting theory. Yeah, I mean, there is evidence that the Native Americans have been around a long, long time. So I think it's such a large, it's like multiple countries in one large landmass. North America, it's huge, So I think they were probably coexisting, maybe not even knowing you were there. Each other's were there all through the Americas. So, but yeah, it seems like vast areas were kind of, like you start finding that in Ohio. It's where Ross lives, and there's tens of thousands of ancient earthwork sites, which look like, and many of those the giant skeletons were excavated from, and so we know they were probably the builders of them. I think that's like pretty basic kind of, putting two and two together. And so there's also the evidence of multiple different nationalities. So they look like they were traders and connecting with other people around the world up through the river systems, going out into the Atlantic. And so you have to, consider that as well, because there's been Egyptian stuff and even Hebrew carvings, actually in the mounds often. That's the strange thing
with the giants.
Yes, with the giants, yeah, and also
interesting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it just gets. The more you go into it, the deeper you get, the stranger things you find. I mean, Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, which is a beautiful place, and it's the first one we really visited when myself and Sheena kind of travelled from New England through Pennsylvania and did our 6-week research trip around the mounds, and that. They found like a giant male and a giant female skeleton in the slightly different heights. The male was slightly taller, but the female one looked like it had European kind of connections with some of the artifacts found and the style of the different type of bone structure and things like this. And so, there was a legend that stated that a queen or a high level priestess or someone from Britain or that part of Europe came over, and actually they kind of interbred with the kind of race here, and it was like a royal kind of thing going on. So there's all these kind of little clues that keep popping up when you're trying to piece these different things together. So, and this is also where they found the Grave Creek tablet, which is like got this incredibly strange carvings on it, which people cannot kind of quite understand. But people say the Punic or Phoenician, but the dating to we're looking at the European kind of contact, and the style was about 1000 BC. So we get some idea to about 100 BC. And so you just don't know. So it's almost like the Adena culture, who were the earlier culture of the mound builders, and then there was a slightly later Hopewell culture. There's debates about the exact timings of when they were there, but I think people now believe the Adena were possibly up to 2,000 or 3,000 BC rather than 1,000 BC. They're traditionally told, that's when they were. Whereas a Hopewell are probably 1,000 or so years later, but they did cross over in the same area. But the Adena seems to be connected with the giants, although could be the Hopewell as well, because obviously they come right up to the present day, like a few hundred years ago. And so and also with the you look at if potentially someone did come over from Europe, the mound styles are very similar to what you get in England. You get the same kind of mounds. And there's legends of giants all through England as well. And like, for example, the Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, it looks very similar to Silbury Hill in Wiltshire, which is the major megalithic area of England. And there's, legends of giants in that whole area as well. But people don't take them, there aren't as many reports and discoveries as there have been in North America. Also around Grave Creek Mound, if you want just a little bit more info about it, there's like Mounds. It's a place called Moundsville, and there's the prison there, which has all this strange paranormal activity going on right next to it, and also the earthworks spread right. They were like complicated geometrical earthworks with an octagon that go, several hundred meters into the town, which have now been mainly destroyed by the town. And this is just one site, and there's sort of these stories and artifacts associated with that. But obviously, there's a lot more going on than just that.
Well, let me ask this question, because you were talking about the similarities between the mounds in the United States and the ones in England. And I know that the ones in England have the, upright megalithic stones that kind of line the walls of a number of those structures and, the stones on the top. Did they find the same kind of construction in the ones in the Americas? The inside chambers?
Some of them are very similar. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much stonework in Ohio because you just can't get it around there as easily. You get more of that in New England, really, parts of Pennsylvania, New York State. But yeah, there are remarkable similarities. Just the style, shape. There's some of them had like moats and ditches, and banks, and lined. Banks and things like this. And so, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. And even Stonehenge is fundamentally an earthwork with a stone circle inside it. Avebury is the same. It's a massive earthwork with a stone circle inside it. So there's earthworks as part of the design as well. But there's a lot more stone available in England to make everything, megalithic as such. But I think... thanks to Squire and Davis, who kind of surveyed most of these sites before many of them were destroyed, we were able to get quite detailed geometrical kind of maps of the site. Some of them stretched, some of them were like several square miles wide.
Wow.
Huge geometric earthworks with octagons, squares, and all these different shapes and geometries and alignments. And there was a fundamental measuring system they were using. So they were sophisticated people, these Adena and these Hopewell. And it's the same kind of systems and the same alignments to astronomy that we get at the sites in England and lots of different parts of the world. So there was a sophisticated astronomical culture who worked with the land to create these harmonic, amazing temples across the landscape. And we now know that they were working with earth energies, thanks to people like John Burke, who've done some serious scientific testing there. Found that by layering different types of earth and rock and different, matter, you actually create a kind of energy system combining with the natural underground water and the telluric currents which run through the earth. And mounds can act as that too. There's one story, for instance, in Cincinnati. There's a mound in the center of Cincinnati before that was built. And Ross told me this story. It goes way back. And when the first settlers were there, they saw this ceremony take place there, and like the priest or the lead, the tribal chief, was on top of the mountain. It was raining and there was lightning, and the lightning would. So they did all the ceremony, and the lightning hit the mound and this post that was sticking out the top of the mound, and it sent this kind of shockwave into all the water in the moat at the bottom of the mound. And so when the lightning hits, and that charged the water suddenly, so everyone would then run to the water and drink it, and it would be like this healing elixir. And so even things like that were happening in relatively recent, a few hundred years ago. And so that's just one example of like tradition that they probably learned from the people who built the mounds, whether it was their ancestors or it was the giants, who knows. But yeah, so there's multiple different dimensions to this, what we're looking at here.
Let's talk dating here for a second. You mentioned that some of the mounds were built somewhere between 1000 BC and 1000 AD, in that window. How comfortable do you feel with the dates that have been given, or do you think they might go back further in time?
Quite possibly. I mean, there's a lot of debate. I mean, traditionally the Adena are only about 1000 BC, but some people, there's been artifacts, there's been some dating which does push it much further back, just various artifacts and things like that. But there's not much, with just bits of earth and and bits of stone.
And no bones or double rows of teeth to get DNA or anything out of. So
that's the problem, really. Yeah, that is the problem. I mean, because but many of I think there has been some testing done, and they do fit within these time frames. But I suggest that there was an older culture as well, and they've completely disappeared, or their bones have worn down to dust. I mean, many of the skeletons that were excavated did turn to dust, the bones, because they were kind of almost in stasis, like mummified within the earth often, because they were so well put together in there. And so that just pulling them out kind of destroyed them as well. But some of the way they were, I mean, there's so many global connections as well. Regarding the dating, but just regarding the kind of similarities. I mean, I was just in Portugal, and I met up with this guy called Mario, who runs Megalithic.com, and he's an archaeologist who researches all the sites there. And there's huge mounds there, which have got dolmens within inside them. But it's one of the dolmens. The mounds. They were kind of sitting in a circle. These skeletons all facing outwards, or was it inwards? And this is exactly the same as some of the sites in North America. They found these skeletons, these giant skeletons, and they're all sitting around in a circle, almost like they're on a seat, but they're propped up, and they put the earth around the skeleton, so it looks like they're sitting up, facing a certain direction. It's exactly the same style you get in Portugal, and have been found in other places. So you have to question that. It's just a bit of a weird coincidence, when it comes to that. But the thing with the ones in Portugal, these sites in Portugal are dated to 5, 6, up to 7,000 BC. So we're talking 8,000-9,000 years ago. So that's the kind of thing we're being challenged with archaeologically and academically, and just generally people don't really kind of piece that together. So you have to think, well, maybe if they did come over from Europe, then maybe they're much older. If they're being discovered in Portugal and they're still intact, why not in North America? But yeah, some serious research has to be done on this, and I think the archaeologists have to stand up and kind of say, right, let's go and test these out. Let's find these skeletons. Let's find out the true history of of what was really going on.
That's one of the things that I find really interesting, is that we find these cultures that had this advanced technology and whatever that exists in one cultural area, and then we find a different cultural area, with vast space difference, that is creating things in a very similar way. And it just makes me go, maybe we really need to look at the dates, because maybe it was all happening at the same time, but nobody really wants to admit that, or that information was already in existence and it transferred, by some method that is yet unknown, although there are a lot of people that have theories today. But let me ask this, because I know one of the areas that you've done a lot of work with is with the Olmec. And so when we talk about this mound building culture, date-wise, how do they fit in with like the Olmec and the Maya? Or are they contemporary?
Yeah, pretty much, actually. Yeah, almost exactly contemporary. I mean, traditionally the Adena are like 1000 BC. The Olmec are traditionally, the oldest Olmec kind of date they're willing to admit is 1800 BC. Or 1800 BC, but generally it was thriving around 1000 BC. And they were building mounds, and we're talking, not that far from North America, because just the other side of the Gulf of Mexico, you have Poverty Point, and you have other sites in Louisiana, and along that whole southern coast of America. And that's just on the northern, and on the lower part of that, the Gulf Coast in Mexico, is the Olmec sites, which many of them, they were actually mounds. They were kind of pyramidical mounds, exactly like you get in North America. So there's probably connections going on there. So if you're looking at that as 1800 BC down there, then that some people are saying that's the same dating as the Adena, the earlier Adena culture in North America. And there's the Mississippians, which are much further south, which the dates kind of fit into both of them, really. But I think there's evidence of much earlier activity in the south than there is in the north part of North America.
Well, I mean, because the Olmec produced, I mean, I think everybody's familiar with the giant heads,
Yes.
in the general sense of the word. But when you look at some of the other material that the Olmec produce, I mean, some of their death masks, those jade death masks, are stunning. I mean, to a contemporary eye, they are stunning and much nicer than the Maya ones. Or there was another piece that I was looking at, and it was a piece of Quetzalcoatl, but it had like the little astronauts sitting inside, and it was an Olmec piece, and that really surprised me. And it seems like the Olmec were extremely advanced for their quote-unquote early culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the anomalies, really. People aren't really sure how that can be. I think that's kind of one of the big question marks. And also they seem multicultural because some look African, some look European, some look Chinese. And there's multiple different kind of races there, which is equally fascinating and needs to be addressed and is ignored generally. That there was pre-Columbian contact in different parts of the Americas, including North America, of course. There's lots of evidence of that. Excuse me. And so, but I think with the Olmec, I think what's noticeable about them is the fact that they were megalithic culture. They were working with very large megalithic stones. They were working with the earth very similar way as the Adena and Hopewell were in North America. And they had a kind of high understanding of working with the natural earth energies. And they even had similar legends of like the feathered serpent, like Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan or different names given to him. And in North America, there was the tradition of the serpent and the thunderbird, especially around the Ohio Valley area, which is something that Ross Hamilton and Jeffrey Wilson, who both live up there and been researching that for years, have done some excellent research on, and they actually spoke at our conference, and we produced an amazing DVD of their work, actually, because it's quite remarkable, the similarities with different cultures throughout the Americas, really, even going into South America as well, and up into Canada. And I think, if you look at the Serpent Mound itself, in Peebles, Ohio, which is the most famous kind of earthwork mound in North America, has actually got little feathered wings on it coming out of it. Not many people notice that, and so that's that's like the feathered serpent. We're here in North America. We're in Ohio, right in the center of the Ohio Valley. So why would they've got this massive winged serpent up there? So they're like saying, and the same people's traditions of that in Central America and way down in South America, Viracocha and all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole sort of deep connection going back there, going to deep antiquity. And I think the clues are coming out.
But see, again, even, stories that transcend one geographic area, like the feathered serpent, to me, it says all over it that it had to have been something that they interacted with and experienced, and it wasn't just this figment of their imagination.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the ancients knew that, and they knew that we would question it, and not admit it, and so they put it into the landscape so that you can't deny it. I think that's how they kind of communicating with their future ancestors is by working with the land itself, because it's almost impossible to put back into its natural state if it's been manipulated and created all these amazing ancient sites. And I think they had to do it as well. I think it was their kind of not only was it their canvas from an artistic sense, but it was also their survival, where they were using it to harness the energies of the earth. And that could, some people have even said, I think me and Ross talked about this, that the energies they were producing, and this is some of Ross's, latest research, is that it would actually make you into giants, because they were harnessing such powerful energy from the cosmos, from above, the Thunderbird energy, and from the Serpent Earth energy, that would actually influence and could even, make you, more powerful kind of high energy kind of being.
Has anyone ever done any work on, you're talking about the power conduction or energy generating properties of the mounds. Has anyone ever done any work to see if there are ley lines that run into them, or the running water, or other things that would support, kind of that Earth grid concept in the Americas?
Yeah, there is some research on that. There's some good geodesy or geodesy done by James Q. Jacobs. He's done some. He's looking at more the distances and measurements between sites and the astronomy and how they connect. And he's found some interesting correlations. If you look at the latest book by Ross Hamilton called Star Mounds, he proposes that they are all the mound sites, which is huge, some of them in very unusual, weird shapes, are actually like representations of the cosmos, a bit like like a star mirror, and not necessarily the whole landscape is an exact reflection of the sky. Like different cultures built their part of it and orientated it the way they thought it was, and another culture built it a bit differently and put their astronomical signs in, and Serpent Mound seems to be the centre of that, which I find really interesting. And so there's that going on in this part of North America, and obviously you get the same kind of thing happening in England with the Glastonbury zodiac and the different landscape zodiacs, which seem to be a reflection of the stars onto the ground. So yeah, and it does seem they were working with that kind of energy as well.
See, this is so cool. Everybody kind of goes and gets drawn to looking at these different things, and then you start talking to each other, and you can just start piecing together a bigger picture, or go, oh, wait a minute, I need to explore that in my own research. This is good stuff.
Well, you think about it, yeah. You think about these landscape zodiacs in England. They're like, the Glastonbury zodiac, as an example, is like 12 miles wide, and you can actually walk around different edge of each different sign of the zodiac. Maybe a mile long each. And some have got mounds marking a horn of Capricorn, for instance, at a place called Ponter's Ball. It's seriously a half-mile long horn that goes to a point as a massive earthwork, and no one knows why it's there, how it got there. And yet it fits exactly into this greater map of this horn of this Capricorn figure in the landscape. And you can see it from Glastonbury Tor, and so that that's a bit weird. And the same, so you can't actually. They're so big, these effigies in the landscape. You can't see them from the ground. You cannot see them. You can just see into the distance. You can't make out. You have to be above to see it. It'll be like the Nazca lines. So the same things. It's the same kind of headspace you go into when you go into these sites in North America, into these mound culture sites. Because it's like Newark earthworks, for instance, which are amazing. It's like this massive, huge circle of this perfect bank in this perfect, huge circle with this huge octagon, and there's parts going off into the distance. And some of them are several miles square in total, and so you cannot see it. You can just walk along it like you're this little ant walking along this this thing. And so I think that's what people don't realise, the sheer magnitude of what we're dealing with here, and the mindset and the technology and the surveying skills and architecture skills to create it. And then you have to question, well, why? And so, and people don't. People just bulldoze them down and build roads through them because they're in the way and they don't understand them. So that's where the kind of there's a lot. It's just such vast sort of temple spaces. They're like massive football fields that go on for miles, and almost like town planning. But often there's no evidence anyone lived in them. They were just there. So who knows what their true, fundamental purpose was, but, the clues are coming forth.
But it would also support the idea that this ancient culture had some kind of, lighter than air machine that they could survey from some kind of an altitude these different things, like they have talked about it in Nazca for years.
Yeah, I mean, that's they must have had something, because it's almost like it's difficult to comprehend. I mean, because just to make something that big in the landscape accurately is really tough. Because they were perfect circles. They were like, several, 1,000 meters across. Some of them, or about 800 meters across. Sorry, and so they were huge. And yet, very precise, and they were using very precise geometries, sacred geometry. They were using number systems and ratios, which weren't supposedly known about back then, especially in North America. So, there has to be kind of a reevaluation of what we're dealing with here, and the same things with the Olmecs. There's some very sophisticated technologies with the Olmec, which have also been overlooked when it comes to the astronomy and the geomancy and the layout and measurement systems encoded within the sites.
So I'm going to kind of shift gear because I'd like to hear your take on this, and we're running out of time already. But I've heard stories of a group of red-headed giants that were killed by Native Americans, and I'm talking, in the more recent historic times, so the last couple of 100 years, I'm guessing, somewhere in the Midwest. I mean, are you familiar with that story that they got him to go into a cave, and then they
I think that's
the cave on fire?
I think that's Lovelock, Nevada. You're talking about.
Might be.
There are reports of cannibalistic red-headed giants in the Midwest, and I know there are stories where the Native Americans hunted them down. So it could be that one you're referring to. It sounds like it is, but it could also be the Lovelock thing, because they were like mummified remains of these red-headed giants, 7 to 8 feet tall, and they were sort of ferocious people, and fair-skinned, redheads, sort of European-looking almost. And you get this throughout the Americas. You get some people like Brian Forrester and others have been researching. There's lots of the red-haired peoples there. The crimson, look. And so, in Lovelock, there's up to relatively recently, I think even in their museum there now, you can actually go there and actually see evidence of the giants. I'm not sure exactly what's there. There may even be some bones there. I'm not sure. But this was reported, so that this is quite well known that this was for real anyway. So this isn't really a disputed one. This is a genuine kind of case. I think most of them are. I think 99% of them are that were reported and sent to the newspapers. And the way some of the legends of the Native Americans, which is something Ross Hamilton has brilliantly put together in a tradition of giants. I mean, I do recommend listeners, if you're into this subject, you've got to read A Tradition of Giants by Ross Hamilton, because it is the book on it for North America, for the Ohio Valley area, and it's got to be read, because that's the fundamental one you need to read to kind of get the whole story down. And obviously there's hundreds, or a couple of thousand more reports now since that book came out. So there's more evidence to back up what Ross and others have been saying. But the red hair is certainly part of it. And there's evidence of giants in the Southwest who had red hair. They were mummified, and they could somehow bore into solid rock. And that's often where they buried them. Somehow they could drill these 4-foot wide holes into solid rock about 20 or 30 feet deep. And there's very, very odd bronze and gold artifacts and breastplates discovered down there. Some with double rows of teeth and pearls, and all these different artifacts, all in the Southwest as well, which is probably what the Lompoc giant, what he was connected to. And the whole kind of Four Corners area, there's a lot of activity there.
Well, and the reason I brought it up was, because I'm good friends with Brian Forrester, and he always talks about the red-headed elongated skulls. And I was just wondering, because I know you've been there, and actually, aren't you going back soon?
Yes, we are. We're doing a tour there with David Hatch Childress, who's also done some excellent research on these giant skeletons, and all over the country, all over the world. And we're going to, because there's legends down there of giants in Tiwanaku that they built. Giants came and they built Tiwanaku in one night, and then something happened. They got greedy. And they got wiped out. It's sort of like almost biblical kind of story. But Brian has been researching obviously the longheads, and there are some reports of giants coming out down there, which I'm going to have a look at when I'm there. But we're doing a tour with David, Brian, and two friends of ours, Glenn and Cameron Broughton, who are expert dowsers and geomancers. So we're going to do some lot of earth energies research down there as well. late October, early November. We're doing tours down there, and it should be fun. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's always a pleasure to go and visit those lands. I've been going there for the last 6 or 7 years now. It's one of my favorite places. Something about like the whole connection between North and South America. You got Mexico, and I'm fascinated by Costa Rica and all the spheres. I've been exploring down there, and also Colombia. You have the whole San Augustine region, which is a huge megalithic earthwork complex, and then down into Ecuador, and then obviously you have the northern sites in Peru, which are very interesting, like Chavin and Chan Chan and Sechan, and you've got Chanquillo as well, which is a major astronomical temple. It dates back at least 2,000 years. Then it goes all the way down into the main, popular sites in Peru, Machu Picchu and all that, and then into Bolivia, and then even down into Argentina. You have megalithic stone circle sites, and in Brazil, and then right down South America and Patagonia is where more giants were kind of recorded just a few hundred years ago. So there's a lot going on in the Americas, I must admit.
I know that they don't really ever want to talk about. You just see the same 3 sites over and over again, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's a lot to see down there, and if people want to join us down there, we're doing a thing. They can check out megalithomania.co.uk and Brian Forrester's website. It's all up on there, and people are welcome to come and have fun with us. Yeah,
that sounds like fun. You brought up the stone spheres in Costa Rica, and we've had Sam Osminagosh on a couple times, and we've talked about the spheres that they found in Bosnia. But I would like to hear your impression, because I saw this picture of these stone spheres that were in New Zealand, and the comment was, "Oh, well, they were natural sea stones." Now, I don't know; they looked too round to me. Have you seen those pictures, and what do you think?
Well, I haven't seen the ones in New Zealand. But you really have to inspect stuff yourself, like this, because it's difficult to tell from photos, I must admit, because I've been deceived by photos before, and I've thought things were a certain way. When you actually go and see them and walk around at a slightly different angle, it's like, okay, it's not actually. But, I know I've been to the ones in Costa Rica. I know they are very round, some of them. They're perfectly round, almost, some of them, so within half an inch over like 6 feet wide kind of thing. So some of them they're definitely carved. Some people claim some of them are cast, but I'm not sure about that. There's no real kind of solid evidence for that. So they might be, but it'd be almost more difficult to cast a perfect sphere than it is to carve one. They're both equally difficult. You have to have the mold has to be perfectly spherical inwardly. Anyway, so there's all this, but the ones there are just it's strange. It's like what David Childress calls marbles of the gods, and it just seemed like that. They just shouldn't be there. They're huge. We went down south in Costa Rica. There's plenty around San Jose. People go to the museum and the main parks in the center of town. People, if don't want to go traveling down south into the jungle area, then there's a lot there. But down south is where most of them are, and we probably spotted about 50 different spheres just in these villages further south in the Golfito kind of Diqui Delta region. And it looks like this, difficult to gauge, but there's earthworks there as well. And there's
that was another one of my questions. Were there other structures or something else to support that there was a culture there that would make these things? Oh,
definitely was. Yeah, I mean, there's these strange statues, that look almost like the ones from Göbekli Tepe, in fact, which is even weirder. The sort of pale, kind of ghostly figure with sort of strange eyes, and it's the same as similar to what you get in Göbekli Tepe. Some of the relief carvings are just like in Peru, and very similar to the ones at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. The connections go on and on. You can't help but notice them. But often, I've been to the spheres in Bosnia. I had a look at those. None of them were really perfectly spherical, the ones I saw that were in that natural ravine. But some of them looked like they were hand carved, but a geologist with us still wasn't sure. She believed they were probably natural, but most of them were half covered up, so you couldn't really tell. And also the ones in New Zealand, I've not seen personally, but the photos do look compelling. But we know that nature can form almost spherical things. That is, the Earth's almost spherical. Planets are almost spherical, and so we know that pearls and things like that. So we know there are natural forces that can do that, but that doesn't discount some of them. Like Costa Rica and some places are definitely man-made, and they're extremely weird. And it's almost like the ones in Costa Rica are like an art project. They just place these spheres all over the landscape as a kind of geodetic art project. It's very, very strange. It's very surreal and kind of abstract.
Because they're just around. I mean, it just makes me wonder, if they were perfect in Costa Rica, what we find in other areas is, they're doing something perfect here, but then you find the same technique being done somewhere else and it's not as good.
Yeah, you could say that. It's, but I think the sphere is like one of the fundamental. I mean, if you're studying any kind of geometry, spherical geometry, which I'm sure the ancients were, I'm sure they worked with that kind of stuff. There's lots of evidence of that. Then the sphere is like the perfect shape, and so they would yearn to work with that and to create that in a 3D form. And so I think the spheres of Costa Rica. Have could be just a sort of meditation to perfection, being a stone. They could have been, some people say they line up and they're astronomically aligned. Others say they were navigational markers that would stretch out into different oceans from the landscape there. Others say they were kind of working, sort of like compressing the energy lines slightly to stimulate them. So there's different things. So, some people say that there's legends that state that giants or gods would use them as marbles and roll them across the landscape to destroy things. And so there's lots of different theories. I just recommend people check them out. If they're in Costa Rica, they should definitely go and see them, because when you actually see them, feel like, oh, that's very strange. You can't, what is that doing there? So yes, it's a compelling mystery.
Hugh, our time is almost up, so you have your tour to Peru, the Peru area in October. What else do you have coming up? Because you're always somewhere doing something.
Yeah, I just got back from Portugal. I did some amazing megalithic sites out there, which we might organise a little trip there if people want to come join us. If there's any interest, let us know. We can organise something out there, because I met this brilliant guy out there who runs little tours, and he's an archaeologist. Very sweet setup they got there. We're doing a thing in Ireland with Glenn and Cameron Broughton. We're doing a tour there, looking at all the megalithic sites and the round towers. We're doing that in August, 18th to the 28th of August. There's a few spaces left, I think, if people want to get in touch. And then in September we go over to Turkey and Baalbek in Lebanon. So we're going to obviously go to Göbekli Tepe and look at some of the sites out around Turkey. There's some very amazing polygonal walls like you get in Peru, in Turkey. So we want to check them out. And fortunately, we've got Graham Hancock is joining us for a chunk of the tour. And Andrew Collins, who's like an expert on that whole area, and has got an excellent book coming out later this year or early next year about Göbekli Tepe and all the research on it. And then, so that's like a 12-day trip we're doing out there. And Baalbek, obviously, is the biggest megalith in the world, 1,000-ton blocks, which are precision carved. And so that is something we all must see at some point in our lives, I think. It's one of those places. And then, obviously we're doing the Peru trip as well. We're going to be going up, starting in Nazca, doing a 4-day add-on there. And then we're going to do a serious 10-day trip around Peru, going to all the sites, Machu Picchu, and Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytam, but all the different, everywhere you want to go, really. And then to Bolivia for 4 days. We're going to have an extended trip around Bolivia because there's some incredible stuff there. My main thing I want to go to there, apart from Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, is the island of the sun.
You're going to be going everywhere.
Yeah, it's just you got to just pile it all in, haven't you, and just see everything, because it's I just love Peru and Bolivia. I've got a real attachment to it, and got a connection with that place somehow. I don't know why or how. It's just you have to kind of follow these connections. So yeah, and there are some spaces there. People want to come for the ride. It's we have a lot of fun. Obviously, with people like David Hatcher-Childress and Brian and that. We've got plenty of time to explore the sites and to talk about it and get deep into different subjects. We do lectures and little workshops and things like that. Plenty of free time to hang out at the sites and soak up the energies if people want to do their own thing. It's fun and it's something we love to do because it's great talking about. It's great talking about the stuff, but we want to get out there as well and show people around because there's an amazing world of megalithic and ancient sites to explore.
Well, and I know the music is really. We're running late, Hugh, so I need to let you go.
Okay.
So thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope everybody checks out your site, megalithomania.co.uk, and I will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's great.
Oh, anytime, Hugh. Anytime.
Thanks.
And I will talk to you later. That's Hugh Newman. His website is megalithomania.co.uk. And do check out his website about the different tours or the conferences filled with information. And we'll be back with Craig Campobosa after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.